Γεια σας. Είμαι ο Μιχάλης Ομοραϊτής και σήμερα έχουμε να συζητήσουμε ένα πολύ ουσιώδες θέμα, πώς αυτό που μέχρι τώρα είχαμε στο defense γυρνάει στον χώρο της αγοράς. Αυτό κουβαλάει πολλά implications, έχει αγωνίες, έχει υποδομές, έχει επενδύσεις και μάλιστα αυτά γίνονται σε μια περίοδο μεγάλης αβεβαιότητας. Έτσι έχουμε εδώ εκλεκτούς καλεσμένους όπου θα μας απαντήσουν τόσο από το χώρο του Cybersecurity όσο από το χώρο της αγοράς να μπορέσουμε να καλύψουμε αυτό το κενό και να δούμε τι πρέπει να βάλουμε στο μυαλό μας γύρω από το compliance, τεχνολογίες, σκέψεις, ρίσκα που θα πάρουμε. Τις ερωτήσεις θα τις κάνω αγγλικά για τον φίλο Elam και θα ακολουθήσουν όλοι στα αγγλικά. Ελπίζω να μην έχετε πρόβλημα. Let's start. Elam, let's talk about compliance. How do current regulatory trends, meaning privacy, cyber risk, software supply chain, shape the strategic choices of organizations, transition from defense-focused to market-facing operations?
Yeah, of course. So obviously today with all the regulations that are coming day after day, let's call it like that, companies, the vendors that coming from the defense area, which is, let's say, completely not a market trend regulation, need to adapt them products to the regulation of the civilians companies. So obviously they need to get the product more oriented to the civilians. They need to give it, let's call it a flavor of regulation, civilian regulations inside the product, like reporting, like other components that can help the civilian company to use these products. And obviously, all the mechanism, all the support need to be adapted to civilians company in terms of regulations.
Okay. We're going to jump to different issues, meaning vendor risk, business continuity, and that stuff, because moving from defense to the market, it always brings new challenges to us. Mr. Yanis, let's talk about vendor risk. It's quite often that organizations have to have a strategy moving to cloud, using cloud. And how should organizations structure third-party providers and cloud providers in order to satisfy regulators while maintaining vendor flexibility and cost efficiency? And in vendor flexibility, we mean that I can move from one vendor to the other. Cost flexibility is I cannot adapt the cost that suddenly one vendor tells me, and I have to move a cheaper one and a different structure on a monetary basis.
Hello. Thank you for the question. I think it's a critical one. In ours, this situation is like in real life. It's like a relationship. So we must treat our work with vendors and cloud providers as a relationship which is a long-term one, but a long-distance one. So when we mean with a long distance, you have to actually not remember it once a year when you have your audit. You have to keep it alive. You have to constantly monitor, constantly talk with them, not wait when something goes wrong. Also, in order to keep a relationship, like a marriage, you need two things. First thing is you have to basically build and have an escape plan, plan B. And this is quite critical because in case, as you said, something goes wrong or something goes down, you must be able to move. You must be able to move without jeopardizing the business continuity. especially in our sector, is critical. Because a hotel is like a ship that is left at the port, but that cannot stop middle ocean, you know. So then, in order to achieve that, as you said, we have to build our systems and everything based on standard global components. Because, you know, if you build custom ones, then you are in danger because you cannot move. If it's a global standard component that you can take from one vendor or in one cloud provider and move it to the other, then it will work. And this solution, if you have it in place, it will actually help you in the long term. And maybe, you know, not immediately, but it will be very valuable. All right. And first then, in order to manage all this, because we don't have a limited budget, we have to keep the 80-20 rules. So we actually, what we do, I think it's working well, is we have a circle, we put our systems inside, the systems that are, you know, critical to the operation, and we leave the others outside. We focus on them, like when you have your customer database, it's a critical system. The app for the catering is not. So we must focus on the critical ones and put the resources and everything there. So just to finalize, and and the final one is, sometimes with the vendors we have the same problem. It's like they are building their system, we are keeping the infrastructure, but sometimes, you know, it's like having one door, but nobody is actually looking at the door. So you have to be in sync. This is crucial. Sync is crucial. Work with them, talk with them, discuss with them, don't wait from them.
Thank you. I think Professor Spanoudakis, from the early morning, we discussed, I mean, one common discussion here was we're missing talents and people. And the question is that moving to new technologies, moving to the market, we have a scarcity of talent capability. What skills and organizational structure are most critical to navigate compliance, risk management, and resilience in a market-driven environment?
Thank you for the question, and before that, thank you for inviting me to the panel. I'm very glad to be amongst people who obviously are very aware of technology and can contribute to a fruitful discussion. Now, back to your question. I think that the training and the development of the skill set has to realize that an enterprise is a complex socio-technical system. It involves people, processes, and systems, ICT or other systems. And within this landscape, there are dependencies between all these three main factors that I mentioned. And there is, and these dependencies determine also what is the actual threat landscape. So training has really to realize that and be tailored in order to be able to address this threat landscape. Vanilla type trainings might be useful up to a certain extent, but it soon comes to a point where you need to be able to train your people to be able to defend you from the threats that your own very enterprise faces. So that is one important element. Then there are the classic training systems leave it at the point where the delivery of the training material and perhaps some assessment right after this delivery has taken place. Now, the key question here is this sufficient and effective in order to protect an enterprise in the long run? And the answer, I'm afraid, is it is not. You need to see how this training, what is the effect that the training that you did has on the actual usage of systems, the behavior of people, the actual execution of processes, and whether these are collectively more resilient against threats. So in terms of technology, that comes to the point of requiring an integration of training solutions with the security and the cyber risk management solutions. At the moment, I think what we see mostly in the market is silos of two isolated works that do not communicate with each other. They do not pass information that would enable you to assess really what is the effectiveness of the training that you have just performed. Now, let me give one more example of why training has to take into account the realities of 2025 and not what was necessary in the early 20th century. At the moment, AI is used everywhere, whether we admit it or not. In our personal lives, there is no issue. I mean, we can very well admit it, but in our professional life, we do not necessarily admit it. Yet, most of the people in their professional lives, in connection with the enterprise that they serve, they use AI. How do they do it? And how they interpret the results of AI, and how willing they are and ready they are in order to get the outcomes of an AI system suggestion and see whether this suggestion is indeed the right one for the context in which the advice from the AI system was used. I had within our company last week a very extensive discussion around this issue. And we were looking at the question of how do we use prompt engineering. Now, prompt engineering, for those who are not familiar with the term, is something that is concerned with how you instruct, how do you ask, how do you pose the question to an AI system to place the correct question. And I had a discussion with our experts, so the machine learning and the generative AI team within the company. And they were insisting that we should give as much information as possible at the beginning of the querying session to the AI system. Because if we don't do this and we get a result and then we start asking the system to refine the result by giving more information, we run the risk of getting it into an endless loop, of stacking into some local optimum and not being able to get out of this and give us some drastically different answer. Now, if someone considers this scenario, is traditional training appropriate for the modern world? The answer is clearly no. So we need really to move to the next generation of training system and a totally new approach to training.
You give me a good idea to ask you a second question and actually tell us something to the audience about the correct question to the system, to the AI. It is a very good example. Someone asked an AI, can I eat a mushroom? He said, yes. He ate the mushroom and the next minute he died. And the AI said, can I tell you about those mushrooms you cannot eat? Meaning the question was quite right at some point, but was not the complete question to get the correct answer. And the second question I have to address you based on that is measures and metrics. What are the most effective metrics that we have to have in an organization to measure security, people, systems, and resilience in order to have a business continuity? Because you said people, process, technology. How do we measure and how do we do metrics on that?
So now I will run the risk of repeating a little bit myself, because I started my answer to the previous question saying that there is no recipe that is right for all. And I'm afraid I have to say exactly the same now for this second question of yours, which is a very important, of course, question. So it has to do again with the specific enterprise, the specific threat landscape that the particular enterprise faces. So for example, do we have IoT devices? Do we have OT sectors in the enterprise? Are we using mobile phones? In what capacity? Can we have within the enterprise private, not enterprise, mobile phones, business mobile phones, which our personnel uses and for what? Are they allowed to have access to their email, to the enterprise email, through their local devices or not? So I'm just mentioning some examples of the very complex dependency landscape that determines what might be a threat for you. So I'm afraid that everything has to start from this very analysis. And then the metrics need to be configured to the enterprise in order to cover this specific threat landscape. So you need systems, of course, that will enable you to do that, because the metrics is not something that you don't take a measurement once and then you go away and stay for a while without doing anything, and then you come back after a couple of months or even 3-4 weeks and see what the metric says now. You need to have a continuous measurement according to the metrics that you have selected.
It's an ongoing
now,
process.
it is an ongoing process which requires systems in order to support them. It requires to connect the metrics with the raw evidence that you collect from the devices, from the system, from the behavior of people as well. And then you need, of course, to have a layer that will allow you to interpret the results of these metrics. I mean, nowadays you can go to any cybersecurity risk management platform and you will see some risk measure which is between 0 and 100. The key question is, what does this measure really tell you? And in the platform that we vendor and we have created, I'm very sure that this measure might be a little bit different from the systems that ALAM, for instance, have been building and they are vendoring. And when you put these two systems together, because they might be covering different parts of the enterprise, the key question is how do we compare and we can connect and aggregate the results of these measures. And you need to have an answer that is not just an ad hoc approach on how we integrate the two measures and take an aggregate one, but to do it in a technically sensible way.
Okay.
So it's a complex problem.
Thank you. Elam, the next question comes from market adaptation. We move defense-grade cybersecurity controls to commercial products. What are the barriers that work against of adaptation, and how we overcome those barriers? What do we have to take in our consideration?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, obviously there are big barriers when you're shifting from, let's say, government or state technology into the private market. The main things is the complicity of the systems, because obviously in the civilians market they cannot have usually the same capability of complicity, or the same complicity of systems. It needs to be simple. The second, of course, not less important, price-wise, economics. Government state platform have important price, which obviously enterprises cannot afford it. So when you are moving these kind of systems, you actually need to change all the mindset, all the approach, how you get available the systems to civilian market. Another thing that is very important, that the people that using government state platform are very high, usually very high skilled people, while when we move to a civilian, the skill is not always the same, most probably not. So in terms of usability, the platform need to be shifted or adapted to the capabilities of the civilian market. Obviously, from commercial point of view, it's very important that the agility, the flexibility, the speed of answering or developing the features that need to be implemented for the civilian markets are much more important, because the civilian market is more faster, respect the governmental issues. Much other important things from our experience when adapting state technology to the civilian market is, of course, all the regulation from GDPR, NIS2, all the ISOs, and so on and so forth. And we had to do a very huge work to move, let's say, the platform to Europe, because otherwise you cannot sell the technology in Europe, the solutions in Europe, as a mandatory, not to government, European government, but also not to civilians. Or today, each company, enterprise, they ask, okay, where is my data? Where is my information is going? Is it in the States, or is it in Europe, or is it in Asia Pacific, or in Israel? And they deny use systems or solutions that the data is not in Europe for regulation. So it's also a very big step for a company when they're shifting to the civilian. The success, of course, of shifting technology, state government technology to civilians is, of course, the scalability, the fast adaptation to the requirements, which I mentioned before, and of course, price-wise, because usually companies cannot afford state prices against the civilians' prices.
Thank you, Elam. Dimitri, regarding crisis communication, how should organizations communicate cybersecurity readiness, and what happens if you have an event, you have a very large number of clients, meaning civilians that use your facilities? How do you do that, and how you get prepared for that issues, to inform them for the readiness and to inform them for the issue?
Yes. First of all, especially in the last few years, we managed to change the mentality and see that a crisis like this, we shouldn't treat it as a legal defense. It's totally the opposite. Basically, it's a management of integrity. Okay, so it's totally different. First of all, silence may be gold, but not in this case. Definitely not in this case. It's like if you're on a plane and you have turbulence, you need the pilot to let you know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, so it's like you have a vacuum there, rumors and gossip and everything else can't go there and spread. Then the things start maybe escalate, and it's not the way you want to go. So we want to tell the truth. The truth would be that give the data and the evidence that we know, solid evidence, not random, okay? And then tell them what direction are we looking at and what questions are we going to ask to where. So maybe, you don't have all the data yet, but you need to express what's going on. Then give them a specific timeline when you will get another response back. You don't leave a void. You tell them exactly that the next public announcement will be at that stage. Okay, so they'll know, they're expecting something. Second of all, near misses, what we call near misses is like when you have an attack or something goes wrong, that you manage to survive from it. You don't hide it. Normally, in the hospitality sector, they tend to hide things that are under the carpet. This is not the way to go forward. The way to go forward is to see the issue publicly and announce it, and that will take you from the side of being a victim or a possible victim in the future to somebody that actually guards. So you become a guardian from a victim, which is for us is very crucial. And then when you do the communication, we tend to think that you don't need to use legalish terms. You don't want a 50-page announcement that tells you actually nothing. Simple, plain English, so the people can understand, know what's going on and what happened, not just a big announcement. All right, and finally, sing the story. In our case, sometimes, in organizations, you have the senior management having one idea, and the support team or the guys who actually do the work, another approach. This is catastrophic because you have you need to have just one voice, so they must be synced all the time.
I'm again back to you. Regarding information sharing and trust, what governance practices promote legitimate information sharing about threats and incidents, and what are governmental bodies to preserve confidentiality and competitive sensitivity?
Yeah, so of course, let's say like that, the success of cybersecurity is the effectiveness of sharing, and it depends to sharing information in, I would say real time, it will be preferable, but
at least the conference talks about information, right?
Yeah, at this session, the information. As much we can share information between organizations, between CERTs and other, let's say, enterprise, but also governmental entities, it will be more easier maybe to fight this phenomenon of cyber attacks. Obviously, it's not something that's easy because companies are concerned maybe for legal, confidentiality, reputation. So the point to share information, it's a quite, let's say, a hard point to digest it. But of course, if we will be able to create a strong governance that govern what information is sharing, how it's sharing, who can see it, and what can see, so it will be very helpful to combat this phenomenon of cyber attack. We will never have the, I don't believe that we will never have the, let's say, the situation that we don't have any more attacks, but at least we can try to minimize it while sharing certain information between organizations. Something that start to move, but we have a lot of work to do. Another point that we need to of course, to take care about is the legal safeguards and try to disclose the right information, but not information that it can harm the companies, of course. This is more or less, I think, the main points when we are speaking about sharing information between organizations in the civilians market. And it's something that we need to go much more and build this trust between the organizations to help each other to combat the cyber attacks.
Thank you, Elam. And the last question goes to Professor Spanoudakis. Let's talk about the future outlook. What regulatory developments or market forces do you foresee for the next 1 or 2 years? And how these changes or developments will influence how organizations will defend, adapt, and endure during uncertainty?
Right. So there is something that I do not need to foresee because it's already here, but the effects of it have not been fully realized. And that is the NIS2 Directive that has become a law of the Greek state since late 2024. Now, NIS might be seen, NIS2 might be seen as yet another compliance check that organizations need to address. Except that there are two very important issues within NIS2. The first is that it requires the assessment to be continuous. So it's not like Theo. You don't get your car there once. You get a white report so you can drive it safely, meaning without the risk of getting a fine. But you need to do it continually. Now, what continually means, it depends again on the threat landscape of each enterprise and so on. And the directive itself doesn't set exactly what is the periodicity or the strength of this continuity, but it has to be continuous. So you need to have systems for that. The other thing that NIS requires is that you are no longer need to prove that you are safe yourself, security-wise I mean, you are secure yourself, but you need also to take into account the security posture of your vendors, your supply chain. And that, of course, means that you need to be able to check whether or not their systems are also secure. Now, these two, the depth to which you will assess that is another matter. You can go on something from having their guarantees and perhaps some information that is merely at a static level. So, for instance, what sort of vulnerabilities the systems have and so on, down to monitoring some critical operations of these other systems that your systems are interacting with. But certainly the NIS2, if it is to be implemented in the way that it has been set, requires really some drastic technological changes in the setup of the security systems that enterprises have. The other thing is more on the 4C side of your question. So that is another act from the European Union, which is the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA Act. The CRA Act is going to be something equally strong as NIS2. And it's an act that will require the vendors of software, regardless of where this software is used, to publish information about the security of this software. At the moment, for those who have the right technical awareness, we have the so-called software bill of materials. So some specifications that say, this is my software, this is exactly what it does, this is the extent that it addresses security, perhaps this is the extent to which it uses AI. So imagine now this being spread by regulation all over the place, regardless of whether we write software for an enterprise, software for a car, software for a mobile phone, software for a medical device, and so on. So this information has to be collected, analyzed, published, and consumed by all those who are making use of the software wherever it might be appended and wherever it might be used. Now, beyond the regulation, what will be needed in a setting like this is more automation. It is impossible to be able to receive and process this information in a meaningful manner, meaning addressing the regulatory requirements and at the same time being able on the basis of it to measure your cybersecurity risk without having systems that enable you to do it.
Να προσθέσω σε αυτό που είπατε, καθηγητά, ότι ένα άλλο που πρέπει να προσθεθεί για τον ελληνικό λαό, για την Ελλάδα, είναι αλλαγή κουλτούρας. Το security δεν είναι nice to have, είναι we must have. Και δεν πρέπει να το αντιμετωπίζουμε ως μία ενέργεια αφού φάμε μία σφαλιάρα ή κάτι πάει στραβά. Πρέπει να έχουμε σχεδιάσει από εξ αρχής τι θα κάνουμε, πώς θα αντιμετωπίσουμε τις καταστάσεις, να μην συμβούν ή αν συμβούν, να συμβούν με το μικρότερο impact στην εταιρεία μας ή στη ζωή μας. Άρα όλα αυτά που συζητήσαμε νομίζω ότι στοιχειοθετούν σκέψεις για όλους μας εδώ, πώς προϊόντα που θα αρχίσουν να βγαίνουν από το κομμάτι των πιο βαριών εγκαταστάσεων και γίνονται civilized στην κοινή αγορά, δεν είναι μόνο να πάρουμε ένα προϊόν, είναι να το εντάξουμε σωστά, σχεδιαστικά, με κόσμο, υποδομές, πλάνο, οργάνωση, που θα απαιτήσει και διαδικασίες και κόσμο και επενδύσεις και σκέψεις στο μέλλον. Είμαστε το τελευταίο πάνελ πριν το φαγητό. Να ευχαριστήσουμε πάρα πολύ που καθίσατε και μας ακούσατε. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ και ευχαριστώ πολύ τους ομιλητές μας. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.